Welcome to the Gamut of Performance Podcast, Episode 8. On this episode of the podcast, I get to talk with Dr. Travis Triplett. Dr. Triplett is a professor at Appalachian State University and is also the first female president of the NSCA. We talk a little bit about her journey, how she got to where she is, and then we also dive into how the strength and conditioning coach can maintain their value in a currently changing world. There's a lot of factors that go into being a strength coach these days, and so it's not like it used to be. There's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses, if you will. And so we get into how a strength coach can be a strength coach without working themselves to death in the process. Great talk with Dr. Triplett, so without further ado, here is Dr. Travis Triplett. Dr. Travis Triplett, thanks for being on with us today. For the listeners at home, why don't you just give us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you were?
Okay, so I've basically been in the academic end of strength and conditioning my whole career, with a little bit of side trips into some more practical stuff. But I did my bachelor's degree at Wake Forest University, and I ended up majoring in health and sports science is what they called it back then. Okay. And it was a new major. I was actually in the first graduating class, so it was cool. But I had found the major by accident because I took an anatomy class, and it happened to be taught in that program. Yeah. And so, because I was in biology, and then I realized that no, this is where I needed to be. And then I came to Appalachian State and got my master's. And again, I was in the first class of people to get a master's in exercise science.
Really?
They had previously had exercise science was like a track under the PE masters. Okay. And so I did that, and then I did a year at the Olympic Training Center out in Colorado Springs working in the sports physiology labs. And basically all we did was test athletes. That was a lot of fun. And then after that, I went to Penn State and got my PhD in exercise physiology. So as you can see, it's been pretty much exercise science all the way. But the people I worked with were the ones that had the most impact on my career. So, in undergrad, strength and conditioning was really not a thing in terms of studying. Obviously, people were competing in things, Olympia and weightlifting and things like that. But it wasn't an academic curriculum. But when I came to App, Mike Stone, who's one of the more, I guess, historical strength and conditioning type of academics, he came my second year and became my mentor for my master's thesis. And then at Penn State, I studied with Bill Kramer, and he's kind of been a guru with strength and conditioning research, especially like the endocrine, the hormones, and just general training adaptations types of training side of things. So after I left Penn State, I went to Australia for a postdoctoral fellowship, and it was research. So that was when I branched out and looked at a different population. I worked with elderly folks, and we did strength and conditioning with them. We did power training with them, which was kind of a new thing in that age group. And so I was there for 2.5 years, and then I took my first faculty job at University of Wisconsin La Crosse. Okay. And I was there is where I became more involved in the practical side of things, because I was a faculty member, but I was also the director of strength and conditioning for the whole campus. And so that was a Division III school, so that they their setup's a little different than you think of a typical Division I. But we still had about, I don't even remember now, about 14 or 15 teams, and so I had a couple of strength coaches that were basically under me, and they they did most of the day-to-day stuff, but I was involved with a few teams, and so I was there for 5 years, and then I came back to Appalachian, and I've been here on the faculty ever since. And but again, in the exercise science curriculum, although they were in place before I got here, actual concentrations in strength and conditioning at both the undergrad and the master's level. So we've, kept those up and tweaked them over the years. And so, that's kind of been my career path.
Wow. That's a lot of cool stuff. So you were director of strength and conditioning at Wisconsin, correct? That's what you said?
Yeah, University of Wisconsin La Crosse. So it's one of the I guess I wouldn't call it a branch campus, but it's kind of like the UNC system. It'd be like UNC Asheville or something like that.
Gotcha.
It was about 8,000 students,
Okay.
and they were the NCAA Division III was their what they competed at, and so, but we had an athlete weight room, and we had like a faculty staff weight room, and then we had a recreation weight room, and so those were all in the umbrella of strength and conditioning, and so. Like I said, I was a director and I had a couple full-time staff under me. And so we had a huge program of students that were getting the degree. They were getting an exercise science degree it was a focus in strength and conditioning. It was a track. And so they really made up our workforce. Okay. And so we had a lot of student employees at all the facilities. And, it was good hands-on for them, but it was also necessary for us to be able to run those facilities.
Yeah. So... what made you not want to stay as a director of strength and conditioning, or was that never your goal? Like, was it just a kind of a stop along the way?
Yeah, it was more of a stop along the way. I mean, I think I was always an academic. I was always meant to be an academic. I enjoyed the practical side. A lot of the research I've done has been practically oriented.
Yeah.
But I think, when the job, was advertised, it just appealed to me because it involved more than just... the teaching and the research, and so I thought it would be, good experience. And I learned a ton. I mean, I cannot trade that for anything, and I think it's helped me be a better teacher today because I have had that. I've seen the practical side, and maybe, I didn't work in it as much as your typical collegiate strength and conditioning professional, but I at least have that perspective. I've got... basically in undergrad, the only jobs you could get in strength and conditioning would be like personal training. So I did that. I worked in several gyms in undergrad. And so I think I've seen most of the sides of the field. Probably the side I've got the least exposure to is the tactical side because I really have not worked with police or fire or military. But I've got students that are in those fields now. So I've, talked to them, of course. But
no, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously you're very involved with the NSCA.
Yes.
So will you touch on some of your involvements with the NSCA and some of the difficulties that go along with being the first female president?
Okay, sure. I've been a member for 30 years now. I joined in 88, and so I was fortunate enough that both my mentors that I mentioned a minute ago, Dr. Stone and Dr. Kramer, they have both been president of the NSCA, and it was during times when I was either working with them or had just recently worked with them. So I think they created opportunities for me in that organization by putting me on committees and things like that. And so letting me speak, and back then the organization was small, the conferences were small. And so it was a lot easier for, a grad student to get a speaking gig or be on a committee. And now it's much more difficult. But, so that really helped because I think I got to meet different people, and I got to do things that obviously helped to build my resume.
Yeah.
And I always say that service or just opportunities lead to other opportunities. That's why it's important to, when people ask you to do stuff, if you can at all do it, it's important to do it because that will open the door to so many other things.
Yeah,
and so
agreed.
I think that's just how I stayed involved, and because I just kept kept being asked to be on. I finished being on one committee, and I'd be asked to, do this or do that, or be on another committee, and so I've just stayed involved with that organization, and also it was the one I felt like I could contribute the most to. I'm also a member of ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, and have been actually for a year longer than I've been a NSCA member, but it was just. And I used to go to the conferences more frequently, but it was just an organization I think that was, I don't know that it was bigger, but it was more broad. It had has doctors in it, it has personal trainers in it, it has other types of professionals. And I think I just felt like it was more, or I should say less focused, and I just felt like I couldn't really contribute a whole lot. I would just be a person showing up at conferences. Whereas NSCA, I really felt like it was much more focused, initially more on athletic aspects of strength and conditioning. It's obviously grown into more things now, but I felt like I could be involved and make a contribution, of my time and my energy and my excitement, because I really cared about what the organization was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I've kind of made it my main professional organization. Gotcha. But it's interesting because I think even now the percentage of women members is about 30 to 40%. Okay. And when I was just starting out, it was probably maybe 25 to 30%. So it's grown a little bit, but not
at the rate you
not as much as you would think. But it's funny because I really haven't felt out of place as a woman in the organization, which could easily be done if you're, it is a male-dominated field, just especially in the collegiate ranks. But I just never felt like, I just felt like myself. Like I never felt like, oh, you're a woman and you're in this. Yeah. So, I mean, that's been a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, it's historic that I'll be the first female. But I don't know. I guess I'm just not really thinking that much about it. And because I haven't had difficulties. I know other people in my, in the field have had difficulties along the way, maybe because they were a female. But,
do you think some of it's your mindset and obviously like your qualifications?
I think some of it is that, and maybe I'm just, I don't know, if naive or just not even looking for it. I'm just doing my thing and whatever, But I do also think that it's much more equalized in academia. So I know there's a woman that I kind of knew who she was. I had talked to her for the first time at last year's meeting. Okay. And she has, I think, experienced, because she was like it's just not really recorded well, but she was the first woman employed by a professional football team.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it was back in 1991.
Yeah, okay.
She was employed as an assistant strength coach. And I don't know if it was like specific to a position, I can't remember, but it was, nobody even knows about it.
Yeah.
And so in that way, like I think she's had more battles to fight than I ever did with that kind of stuff. But now it's becoming more commonplace, and I mean you see it now. There's women that are serving as assistant type coaches or referees or whatever in professional sports that are the male versions, professional sports. So it's it's starting to come around, but. It's interesting that I really haven't had any kind of negative experiences.
No, that's cool, though. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And moving forward with that, right? So, a lot of strength coaches are being devalued, whether it's coaches asking unnecessary time of theirs or not necessarily following their recommendations and wanting to do their own stuff because that's what they did, right? So what is the NSCA doing to stop the devalue of the strength coach?
We're working on that. So we've been looking at, and the problem is these kind of processes are slow. So
yeah, definitely.
They do take a while, but we're looking at, I think we were waiting for some critical mass. So that's really one of the reasons that the collegiate strength coaches left and formed their own association. Okay. They felt like they were needing more advocacy for just that, like how can we raise I don't know if it's not, in my mind, it's not credibility because I know we're credible, but it may be credibility to external people. Yeah. But how can we raise our profile so those kind of things don't happen? And and so anyway, but I think the NSCA, if you look at something like a model similar to, let's just take athletic training for an example. Whoever decided way back that, okay, this is an important field. It's necessary for sport. We need to, I guess, raise our whatever. I'll use the word credibility. Yeah. So we need to standardize things.
Yeah, to change that perception. Huh?
And so you can't do that without standardizing it. And so, the education recognition program has been around a while, probably 25 years. I think we're just now at critical mass where there's programs out there at universities that focus on strength and conditioning related aspects, that are part of exercise science usually. So now it'll be easier to try to move towards standardizing. Here's what you need to know to be in this field.
Definitely.
And then so how that translates into, is it something we're going to have degrees? Is it something that will, it'll be like NATA where if you don't have that, then you can't even take the certification. But see, it's like a domino. So if we say that you can't take certification without that XYZ training courses, whatever you want to say, then that means the people hiring people have to agree that, okay, we're not going to hire people without the certification. So then it's all got to, it's like a big puzzle that has to fit together, and everybody's got to be willing. But, the NSCA and the CSCCA, for that matter, have been in talks with the NCAA about this type of thing. It's like, how can we raise the profile of the strength and conditioning coach so they're respected and that they're not, kind of overruled by people who clearly don't know everything that they need to know about strength and conditioning. So it's in the early stages, but people are aware and they're coming up with possible solutions, but it may take a little while, but it's not gone unnoticed. So
Fair enough. I mean, kind of on that same topic, right? So a lot of people are still attracted to the profession. They want to get into it, but a lot of people that are in it, I feel like, are losing their luster because like old school coaches are prided on getting there early and staying late, and then that's being expected of younger coaches that like now have families and they're trying to do more. So can you just kind of touch on that a little bit and just the perception of being prided on how long you're at work?
And those kind of things are so hard to change. It's like a badge of honor,
exactly.
And so I did more reps than you, or I can lift more weight than you, or I stayed at work longer than you, So it's going to require a culture shift, but I guess our hope, and going back to me personally, but also the NSCA, is that if we can raise the standard of the strength coach, I'll just say it like that, then the universities will put the money into hiring, and then if you've got more people, then you can spread the workload among and maybe get away from this more is better thing. But that one's really tough because I think nobody's really monitoring that, and there's no like laws against working whatever extra time, and so that one's going to be tougher. But fair enough. I mean, kind of on that same vein, right? How can strength coaches diversify to avoid some of those pitfalls of falling into like a niche market and maybe attaching themselves to a coach that gets fired or something like that? Well, I think, and again, that one's tough too because, like you said, the time demands are pretty crazy. And so, what the stuff I'm going to suggest, it's going to take time, and that's what people don't have. So it's like a catch-22. But I think just whether it's at the state level, whether it's the local level, whether it's everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses. So some people say, oh, well, writing is terrible,'a never write articles. Okay, fine. Don't force it. But maybe you're a good speaker. Volunteer to speak at a state strength and conditioning clinic, whether it's NSCA or not. There's some of those events I just spoke at one that's for this organization, or it's a facility called Athletic Lab. And it's down near Raleigh. And but he puts on a really high level conference. This is the third year he's done it. And he brought in some really heavy hitter speakers, and he gets sponsorship from some, I think, a couple equipment companies and maybe a supplement company, and that's how he's been able to afford that. But I guess just getting known, because still this field is very much who you know. Now,
definitely.
It's what you know to keep your job. But it's who you know to get your job. And so, because if you're terrible, you're not going to last. But, even if you got your foot in the door. But so it's somehow getting out there. So whether it's attending conferences or speaking at them, or if
Yeah.
you can pair up with a faculty member and maybe you guys could or people can work on data. Let's say you test a team and you want to write up a little article and just getting your name out there. It's just those kind of little things slowly add up. And then like I talked about before, service opportunities. If somebody asks you, hey, will you serve on this committee or will you be on this, be on this advisory board? And if you can all squeeze it in, it does really help to get your face and name out there.
That makes sense.
And then that, again, that can help lead to other opportunities or make you more marketable. So then you can look for jobs that don't have these crazy time demands on you. Because some places are doing it right. They're not asking ridiculous things of people. But there are plenty of places that are, slow to move away from that.
Definitely. Okay. So kind of moving forward, right? So a lot of coaches are prided on being like self-taught. So like James Smith, Joel Jameson, like Charles Poliquin. So how important is formal education? We kind of just talked on it a little bit, but say like the advanced degrees, multiple degrees, things like that. How important is that kind of stuff?
I think overall, just in the field of strength and conditioning, there's been so much attention and emphasis in the research realm in the last, 15, 20 years. We know so much more than we did, you know. And I think education takes many forms. And it seems like, at least from my observation, the best strength coaches, I guess in terms of maybe longevity, are the ones that keep learning. And I'm not saying they're taking classes. They're doing stuff. They're either reading articles or reading books or talking to people or they never give up trying to better themselves or learn new stuff or understand what they're doing. So I kind of think education it's important. It's going to probably be more important in the future because there's going to be so much information. It's going to be really hard to do all of it on your own. And then if the field changes to where there's some actual requirements, XYZ courses or XYZ degree. But I guess I look at, right now, and I don't think it's, there are jobs out there if you just have the bachelor's. I mean, but, I think you've got to have that experience piece too. So the master's isn't required, but that's a common route for a lot of people for a couple reasons in my mind. One is you can get a graduate assistantship, which really helps you get a leg up with your practical experience as well as get that important recommendation from the head or whatever strength coach you're working with. But the other thing is, not every undergraduate program has adequate instruction in our field. And so a lot of people, I think, feel like they need to go get a master's because they don't feel prepared from their undergrad. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But as far as a PhD, I don't think that's a necessity at all unless you really want to just be in academia from a research perspective. I don't know how that's going to change with how sports science develops, because teams are starting to hire sports scientists. So they're not faculty members. They don't teach, but all they do really is try to help the coaches and the athletes improve their performance. So that's kind of a newer thing. We don't really know where that's going to end up, but maybe some of those people have advanced degrees. I don't really know. It seems like it's kind of 50-50. But,
so moving a little bit more toward your wheelhouse, right? So let's talk research a little bit. How can strength coaches be more in tune with the kind of cutting edge research on the national scale, and how can they get involved with more research and some of that kind of stuff on the smaller scale, like on their own campus, for example?
Well, I guess the national scale, there are journals out there that focus on publishing stuff that's related to strength and conditioning. So if people feel comfortable reading that, but I get it that sometimes, you read something and you're like, what does this mean? How can I use this? And so, I think there are some... first of all, the Strength and Conditioning Journal comes to mind. It's definitely geared more towards a practitioner, but it's based in science. They want the articles to have some evidence, to support what the article's saying and not just be like, well, this is what we do in my, my weight room. So that's kind of the national thing. I guess locally, we've pretty much opened our doors to any coach that wanted us in the health and exercise science department to do testing on the athletes. And so a lot of schools are willing to work out some type of arrangement. And sometimes, we could test till, do all kind of stuff, but we only want to really do something that's going to be helpful. Because you can generate data all day, but if it really doesn't mean anything, what's the point?
Exactly.
So but I think a lot of schools are perfectly willing to help out their athletic department. Some may want to set up a fee for service type of thing, but we've tried to avoid that. Because we liked having the partnership because it helps us maybe place students as interns with teams if we can So it's kind of a, trading favors thing. But the key point, I think you said it, is really trying to figure out when you read something or hear something, like how can I use this? What does this mean for me? And so that's where I think scientists have sometimes struggled to make that translation. And that's the whole mission of the NSCA. And, yes, it's not perfect, but is bridging the gap. That's in the mission statement. And so, but that's sometimes hard to do. So, because there are some aspects of this research that are so far removed from practical day-to-day stuff that it's it's not so applicable. But then there's plenty of things that are very applicable. So I think it's maybe if you as a practitioner don't feel comfortable, then try to find somebody to maybe talk to, like a faculty member, that can help you out. But and then that's what the conferences try to do. They try not to have too many talks that are only focused at a tiny percentage of the people could understand them.
Definitely.
So
okay, cool. So one of your areas of focus or areas of study is neuromuscular adaptations, correct?
Yes.
So what can strength coaches do in that area that they might not be doing, right? So obviously we can vary some parameters within strength and conditioning, but what is some maybe simpler things that most people aren't thinking about?
I've just noticed recently that there's probably, and maybe it's because we're just now starting to see a generation of athletes that weren't well trained when they were children in just basic movement skills. And actually at that athletic lab conference, there was like 2 or 3, maybe 2 talks that were related to different things about that. And I that kind of struck a chord with me. I'm like, because I see it a little bit when I teach my undergrad theory class, and we do some practical activities, and some people just are they just struggle with basic movement, and that's a thing. If you can't do that, then you can't master advanced stuff, and it goes even back to things like, the talk I gave was talking about, it was about training females, but that, as there's like certain injuries that are more common in females, and it's like just landing mechanics, running mechanics, like cutting and decelerating, and things that seem so inherently obvious or natural, but they're really not. If you video people or just watch a lot of people doing stuff, I believe I showed a plyometrics workshop video in one class, and the range of skills was quite broad, and these are practitioners in the field, and I'm just thinking, if they can't adequately demonstrate something, how do you really expect anybody to learn it? So
that's a good point.
And that really is back to neuromuscular movement and control. It's that neuromotor control system, and going back to just learning the basics before going any further.
Okay, no, that's a really good point. And so one of your other areas of focus is resistance training in elderly, correct? Yes. So how can those of us that aren't, say, in the college realm, say personal trainers or other fields, how can we attack that area better?
I think the perception is that they're going to break. And so, and that's why I mentioned earlier that we did power training with older people. And of course, you just like with power training with younger people, you have to establish a strength base. You can't, but you don't have to follow the 2 times body weight squat guideline, in an older person. So I think it's developing their strength, and that may mean some hypertrophy, and that's okay. You don't even have to use that word with them, but they've atrophied their muscle, they've had muscle loss, you want to get that back, you want to strengthen what you've got, and then it's perfectly okay to do some more explosive movements. And all of those things together will help quality of life. And at that point, I think that's what most people are interested in. They're not you get people competing. You see on the TV the 80-year-old woman powerlifter or whatever. But being able to not fall down if you have a disturbance in your balance, just things like that, which we know, we just know from all the research that's out there now, that resistance training can help that. So, we're just not being afraid to lift heavy and not being afraid to lift explosively, provided you've built up to that point. But they don't just need to do like chair dumbbell exercises or something,
which is what you see most people doing.
They don't have them doing. I mean, I prefer free weights with this population. It's harder to teach, but they get so much more out of it than. And I'm not against machines, but just in this population, they've lost the ability to really coordinate their muscles, and so you're having to reteach that. And but that's so important for them to, do stuff on their own and to not fall down. Yeah, no,
that makes sense. So we kind of touched on it earlier, right? We talked about the integrity of like the strength and conditioning department, and you touched on the NCAA a little bit. Is the NCAA doing anything to help us or to hurt us, or are they kind of neutral in this whole equation?
Ooh, I think part of me thinks that they have so many other things on their plate that the least of their worries is us. But I do know, I was very glad to see whenever it was 2 or 3 years ago that when they said, you have to be certified. And the initial statement was either NSCA or CSCCA. And we gave a collective cheer, like finally, because really these certifications are your minimum level of competency. That doesn't mean that you know everything and can do everything, but if you have that, at least that's one
check in the box.
One check in the but then they backed off. Unfortunately, they backed off of that, and they just said I don't remember the wording, but because there's agencies out there that certify certifications. Okay. So they say yes, this is a valid certification because it does this, and this, and the NSCA got that blessing from these certifying agencies for our certifications, both of them, and CSCCA has it. But and then you have to be careful with the category because there's other certifications out there, and they're in a less stringent category. But that's the problem. The NCAA said, well, as long as it's recognized by this certifying agency, it's okay. But it's really not. So that's too weak. It's better than it was, which was nothing. But now, now they kind of backed off a little bit, and that was the classic example of what happened at Oregon. The strength coach had a track and field strength coach certification, and so according to NCAA, that was fine. But as we know, that certification was never meant for strength coaches. It was meant for track coaches to know more about strength and conditioning, and so it's, in my opinion, it's not fine. And so, and I'm not saying that everybody that has that will hurt somebody, but that that's what happened, and you just so I think they've made some progress, but it's hasn't been enough, and it's been pretty slow as well. But like I said earlier in our conversation, that the NCAA has been in talks with the NSCA and the CSCCA, so I think the relationship will continue to progress, and maybe they'll make the requirement about who can be hired as a strength coach to be a little stricter, and that should help elevate the profession.
No, definitely. I agree. I mean, it's a lot of good stuff here, but what are you currently working on now, and how can people kind of reach out and follow your journey?
Well, I guess my biggest thing right now is the taking over the presidency of the NSCA. So I don't really know how much time demand that'll be.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't know it's a volunteer position. It's not a paid position.
Okay.
So it's really a service commitment, a pretty large one. But I do think it's something I want to do, and I'm excited about doing, and we've got a lot of good stuff that the organization's working on that will, more information will be coming out in the coming months. And so from that point, that'll be my main focus. And then obviously I've got to keep my day job. So I'll be teaching my classes here at Appalachian State and, just the normal stuff I do. I've kind of scaled back the last couple of years. Just
have to with all
I've got a lot going on, program director and things like that. So I mostly just help students and help my fellow faculty, but I'm not really working on anything myself in terms of like my own research agenda. But I'm not inactive, but I'm not as active. So so that's mostly it. But really, I'm most easily reached by email. So I'm an email away, and I'll be just focused on taking the helm for the NSCA and everything that we've got going on. And because, we're about 30,000 members worldwide, and there's, I believe, 5 international affiliates. And so my travel load will increase. That's, at least they cover that, even though they're not paying me. But, so it'll be exciting. I'll be busy. I'll be going all over the place, but otherwise I'll be here.
Okay, well, appreciate your time. This was great. I think there's a lot of good takeaways.
Okay.
So thank you for your time once again, and hopefully you'll talk again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
Always great getting to catch up with Dr. Triplett, and there's always something I can learn from her. Thanks for listening, and once again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it on social media. Please give it a rating on iTunes. We're also available on Spotify now, so that's yet another option for you to access the content, or for a friend that doesn't have iTunes or Google Play. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, this is Juan Perez with the Game Muted Performance Podcast.